So each of you, I'm going to have you turn in your packet or in the handouts to the impromptu speech. And this is the description that I'm going to be going over. So after I go over this description, I'm going to go into a format and I'm going to lay out exactly how to do this speech for you. And then we'll try a couple samples together so that you can see how simple or easy it's going to be or how it's going to go. And I promise you it will be. So let's look at this. The impromptu speech is a speech that is given with little or no preparation. Where do you come across times or opportunities that you are required to speak with little or no preparation? Yes, like what? Talking to a friend, fantastic. Talking to a professor, great. A job interview, great.
You prepare for the job interview.
Exactly. Anytime we speak, we usually have some type of preparedness in us. When we're talking to a friend, we don't go into it being like, I don't know what to talk about, I have nothing. No, you utilize your life experiences and whatever knowledge you have prior to that talking that you go in. In class, if a teacher calls on you, or perchance if you raise your hand and answer a question, you answer that question with the knowledge that you have from the class that you've been taking, the academic study that you've done up until now, or again, relating it to your own personal experiences to contribute to the dialogue. So we're always using the knowledge and the experiences that we have. In a job interview, the same is true. You don't walk into a job interview not being prepared, correct? Okay, what are some things that you do before going into a job interview? You do, first of all, you can do research on the job that you're going to, right? So I look at the organization, and maybe I look at what their value system is, and I look at what their communication or what the culture of the environment at this work is. Or maybe even I research a couple projects that they've been working on or that they've been doing. And I do this so that I get a good understanding of the environment and of the work before I go into it. And why do we want to know about the organization before we go into the interview? Absolutely. So not only have I done my work, but the second thing is that what we are doing is we're applying for a job. The purpose is for you to get that what? Job. And if I am unable to show you how my skills are going to work perfectly with your requirements, your qualifications, and your organization, then I haven't really done my work, right? So it's like the idea that you're always going to have the same skill set. If I asked you what your 3 best qualities are, you could tell me 3 great qualities that you have, of course, but what do we ground them in? Well, we have to ground them in the job, right? So you'll always have those 3 best qualities, but depending on the work that you apply for, whether it be in a sales position or perchance whether you're deciding to go out and like wait tables, or whether you're going into your first careered job right out of college, you are always going to be able to use that skill set. We're just going to talk about it in a different way. So the way that I would talk about my leadership skills when I was talking to, perchance, my panel of interviewers at Santa Monica College about becoming a teacher versus the way that I would talk about those leadership skills if I was going in to promote myself to be on the school board in my local community will be changed a bit. But I know that one of my great characteristics and qualities is being a leader. So the only thing that I really have to do is start to shift that around. The important thing here is that I want each of us to be able to competently communicate an idea within a small amount of time with little preparation. And the way that we can do that is by understanding a simple organization format, which is the same thing that you've been doing all semester, right? And then additionally, working on thinking on our feet and honing in on those delivery skills that are going to make us appear competent in what we're communicating. And those delivery skills have to do with thinking on our feet, avoiding those vocalized pauses, utilizing effective articulation of our language. It's fairly simplistic in this way. The point of having an organized process, however, is to keep you, the speaker, on track. If anybody has ever said, well, just tell me about yourself, all of a sudden, either A, you have no clue about you, right? You're like, oh my God, wait, what? You want me to talk about me? I don't, what? And then by the time you get around thinking about it, it's over. Or the other thing, what happens, you start talking and you're like, when I was born. And then 20 minutes later, people are like, that was a lot of information, right? So how do we synthesize our ideas in a small amount of time and ask exactly, or respond to exactly the question that's been going on? And the formatting always helps us organize our thoughts in a way that's easily understood by not only the listener, but also is easy for us to keep on track. The process is going to be simple for this speech. You are going to come into class on Tuesday, if that's when you decide to deliver your speech, which is our final is this next Tuesday, and it's from 8 to 11 in this classroom. We will all sign up on the board, as we always do. You will take your evaluation sheet, you'll put it on the desk in numerical order. And then what will happen is the first person will go outside of the classroom. I set up a chair and a table outside of the classroom so that you can work quietly. The rest of us will sit in the room. After about 4 minutes, we will have the person who has signed up after you get up. They will pick their quotation, and then they will go outside. And it will work in a round-robin manner. You will get your quotation before the person, or while the person in front of you is speaking. So if, let's say, Nancy was first, I give Nancy her quote. She'll cruise outside. She'll write the speech. When she comes in, the next person will grab their quote, and they'll go outside, and they'll write their speech. When Nancy's done, right, so it'll continuously work in a round robin. So we don't have all that downtime. Does that make sense to you? So when people say, when will I get my information, or when will I get my topic, or can I choose it at the beginning of the class? No. You will choose it right before you go out and you deliver your speech. So you'll have that opportunity to prepare your presentation, but people are always like, oh my gosh, well, how am I supposed to do that in that small amount of time? How am I supposed to write that speech? Well, you already will have your main points in your back pocket, like I said during the email that I sent you all. But I'll tell you about that in a second. So once you get done delivering the speech, you will come in, take a huge deep breath, and then you will deliver the speech. And you're not going to use the podium this time. In turn, we'll be using the space in the classroom for our presentation. And the way that we do that is by incorporating something that we call the speaker's pyramid. If you remember when we went over delivery, or when we even spoke the first day of class, if there is not a podium in your speaking environment, how then do we start to use the space? We know that simply walking back and forth does nothing but create a sense of anxiety in our audience, as well as it doesn't have a purpose. The purpose then becomes a distraction, and why is that person walking back and forth the whole time, right? Thus, we come up with a concept called speaker's pyramid. If you are ever in an environment where you don't have a podium, again, this is a very easy way to use this space and keep yourself moving in an organized way. So if you think about it, when does this speech move? Yes, on these transitions, moving from main point to main point. So the idea is, if we always are moving with purpose, it would make sense for us to move on our main points. So your introduction and conclusion will happen at the front of the classroom. And then what happens is, during each of your main points, you will move to the circles. And so, during each of your transitions, you'll move towards these circles. So it would be something like, so today I'll tell you about staplers, paper, and a podium. So to begin with, I'd like to tell you a little bit about staplers and how they are effective in keeping your work together. Now that I've told you a little bit about staplers, I'd next like to tell you a bit about paper and how they are effective in managing. I told you about staplers, I told you about paper. Let's get around and talking a bit about podiums. And then we go into podiums, and then I'm done, and I say, so today I told you a little bit about staplers, papers, and podiums. Each of these things not only rhyme, but they're important, right? So we're going to go back to this position. Did it seem odd for me to walk during those times? No, because it really moves your audience, and it allows them an opportunity to see that movement as well as hear it, and then it becomes almost a visual ideal. The thing that I do not want to see all of you do is do this, and then take a big step. Like it's so exhausting to walk. Okay, so what I want each of you to do right now on this impromptu speech structure is right next to the part where it says transition in the margin here. I want you to write walk with an exclamation point. Walk. You can write it wherever you think that you'll see it. That's the key, is that you want to walk during each of those transitions. This is in the packet. Do you have your packet? Or no?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is in the packet. All right. That being said, since we don't have a podium, something else happens. You're allowed to have one piece of paper front and back with you. This is the paper that I encourage you to have up with you. Why? It's already the format. It's written out. So in that 4 minutes when you're going out to write your speech, you can jot down quick ideas next to the format parts so that you know where you want to go and what you want to be speaking about. On the back side, I encourage you to write out some key ideas for main points. This is where you can keep your main point information, and you can keep all the key ideas that you spoke about or that you prepared before coming in. So then you have your one piece of paper front and back that has everything that you really need to succeed in the class. The thing about not having a podium, though, and having a full piece of paper, it becomes a little problematic if we have a bit of the heebie-jeebies inside of our body, because then it starts to shake. Does that make sense? And it becomes more of a distraction. People start to use their hands. So I encourage everybody to always simply fold the paper in half, and then you can speak like so. And now it doesn't become nearly as distracting. It gives you an opportunity to hold onto it tight so that it doesn't shake, but it also can be something that you squeeze onto as part of your squeezing sound, even though it's just clearing the throat. But it becomes something that you can hold on to. Does that make sense to everybody? Good. So keep this in mind. So your job is going to be to interpret a quotation and your understanding of that. So what is a quotation? Well, these in this way aren't quotations like we've been utilizing in our speech, something like a perspective or an opinion that supports a claim or proposition or is trying to persuade us, or is a piece of research or a piece of evidence from somebody. But instead, these quotations are going to be things like proverbs or cultural sayings or a motivational quote that was taken from somebody and has become something of interest. And each of these quotations have been used in my class before, and they've been used in my class before and then used again because they work, and you're able to do them. Now I'm going to give you a hint. Are you all ready? You're not ready. Are you ready? You ready for my hint? All right, good. Is anybody else ready for my hint? Do you want it? I feel like there's any enthusiasm about this hint. All right, but it's what I told you already in your email. Each of the quotations that you get are going to be about overcoming a challenge, overcoming some type of obstacle, perchance an individual who has gone through a hardship and has overcome it. And you're like, oh my gosh, Amanda, wow, that's an interesting concept. But think about that in terms of motivation or obstacle overcoming, etc. So when you are thinking, ooh, I don't know what this speech is going to be about, you do, in essence, just like you know that this is going to be about you getting the job, this is going to be about you overcoming a challenge or an obstacle, okay? Now, this isn't a personal speech, so when I say you overcoming the challenge or obstacle, not so much. I want to see how you can apply the outside world in essence, persuading us why you agree or disagree with this quote. So that is going to be the key here in understanding and communicating back to us how you agree or disagree with this quote. And essentially, it's a persuasive message that you are going to get us to believe in. You are going to be required to have main points, and those main points will require you to have vivid detail and examples within them that are going to clarify exactly why you agree or disagree, what your statement is there. So you were expected to maintain poise throughout this process, and we remember that poise means what? Poise. That we hold ourselves with confidence and dignity. And if I was ever in a job interview and I said, Amy, what are your 3 greatest qualities? You would be like, it's so hard. Why are you asking me that question? Oh, I got the hardest one. And then stomp out of the room. You know, when people give you a question, you do what? Smile. You think about it, and then you go on and you move forward and you keep going. If you lose your train of thoughts, you don't stop and go, oh, I can't do this. This is the worst. What are the skills that we've learned in this class? If you lose your place and you don't know what you're talking about,
You pause.
you pause. Give me 1 second. I'm going to think about this next idea I'd like to tell you. I got it now. And then you go back in. Just as in a job interview, if you don't know how to answer the question, don't start talking and rambling. Say, that's an interesting question. Would you mind giving me 1 minute to think about that? Almost every single job employer will say, absolutely, because they'd rather have you say something good than to say something
But can you do it?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. 100,000%. Give me 1 second. I'd like to. That's a great question. Let me consider that for 1 second. And then you pull from your arsenal of information, right? So it's simply communicating with us in a poised manner that lets us know you're on top of it, you're in charge, you're in control, you're the competent and confident one. Sound good? All right, so we'll maintain it with poise and the basic elements of organization and delivery that will be presented. So any questions really on how the process is going to work? Because I'm going to go through the format now to ensure that everybody's on the right track. Sound good? Any questions at all? No? Really? Mm-hmm. All right, let's look at the impromptu speech structure. The structure is very similar to that of which you've been doing all semester, so it should not come as a huge surprise to you. The first thing that your speech is going to start out with is going to be, what, everybody? Oh my goodness, the attention getter, absolutely. And your attention getter in this case is going to be something like why would we start with a quote? If the speech is about a quote and then we have a quote with a quote, this is the only one that we maybe won't use this time, okay? Don't use a quote to start a speech about a quote. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. That's a funny quote. That reminds me of the quote I was given to be. You're like, no, it's just confusing. Okay? So, like you said, you can do a question. What else?
A story.
A story. I love me a story. You can do a shocking fact or a statistic, maybe that you remember. All of you have done up to 2 speeches now that are from outside of you already. So if you have some kind of story or information about that you can use to tie into the speech, that would be a great job that you could also use. So think about a way that you can start this speech. However, I'm going to put a circle around this because I have a really easy way for you to accomplish this without spending too much time on it. This is not what you are going to do first. If people who go outside and they write their attention getter first are the people who sit there and think about what? Their attention getter for the 2 to 3 minutes that they're writing and that they don't have anything when they come in here. So I will give you a hint. The attention getter is something that you think about as you're walking in the classroom. Okay? and I will give you exactly how to do that. After you deliver your attention getter, what you are going to do is reveal the topic, right? Because that's what we do in our speeches as well. Now I tell you what this topic is about. Well, this topic in this case is not you, and it's not the significance of a photo, but instead it's about the quote, 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 quote. So you are going to now read the quote and read the author, so doing both, who said it, and provide that for us. And that's all you have to do. I mean, it's a whole 5 points. So easy. And you can read it. And each of you will be getting a quote that is about this size. So don't worry about taking the time to write it down. All you can do is put it right at the top of your paper when you get ready to speak, so that it's always there for you. Does that make sense? So you can always go back and refer to it. So once we read this quote, then we're going to come up with the most important element, which is deriving our central idea. This is what you are going to go back to within each main point. This is what you are always going to refer to. This is what you are always going to talk about. It's the reason that you open your mouth in the first place. This is where you are going to suggest that you agree or disagree. And the key part here is the why. So I give you a quotation. Gustavo, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Your first idea after reading that is, do you agree or disagree?
Agree.
Great. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Do you agree or disagree? Larry, life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Agree or disagree? Disagree. Great. First step is done. Gustavo, why do you agree? What does that quote mean to you? I agree because...
It's unexpected.
Done. I agree because... Done. Larry, I disagree because... Okay, good. Now, this is important. Okay, good. And I'm glad we said this because these quotes aren't literal. Quotes are typically a metaphor for something else, or in this case, a simile. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. You disagree, you said, because you can read the label. So if you wanted to use that as some type of a metaphor, like, because I believe much like a box of chocolates and I can read the label, my life has already been written out for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you could say something to that extent. But each of these persons, what they just came up with was their central idea. So the first thing that each of you want to think about when you get your quotation is, do I agree or disagree, and why? You can say, I agree because. I agree or disagree because. So the first thing that you want to think when you get your quote is, do I what? And why? The first thing I think about when I get my quote is, everybody over here, do I
Agree.
and why? Right? That's the important part, that key. I agree because. I disagree because. That small statement is what you and your purpose is. Now, Gustavo, you came up with this answer very quickly. It took him how many seconds to answer my question? 4, right? And in turn, it took you about 10. Both individuals, very fast. How did you conclude that quickly that you agreed with this quotation? Because why? Or how did you? Or how did you come to the conclusion that fast that you disagreed?
Personal experience.
Yeah, because you've lived life, right? Have you seen the world around you? Have you had experiences where this quote can ring somewhat true? or false in your life? You came to the conclusion because you're like, oh yeah, I've had life experiences. Or what else have you done? You've talked to other people, or you've read the books, and you watched TV one time. There was this show that was like, oh man, that's a bummer. They really thought life was going to go that way, and it didn't. Or you talked to a friend, or you read the newspaper, or you saw a special interest piece on Facebook. Your life, you have been like preparing to agree or disagree with the statement. Now, the best part is that this speech is up to you. There's no right or wrong answer. People are always like, what if I don't understand the quote? Well, then make it up. Make it up what it means to you. If you don't understand the quote, you get to create the agreement or disagreement and what it means. If I say, life is like a box of chocolates, and you never know what you're going to get, and I say, I agree with that, and that means poop. Because that's poopy. Man, if you sell the idea of poopy to me, like, I'm in. Okay, it's up to you. It's your interpretation. You get to create whatever you want. Does that make sense to you all? But how do we know it? It's because we have a breadth and depth of experiences and ways that we can relate to it. So that's where we're going to come up with the last part of our introduction. And that is where we develop the whole thesis, right? So building upon our central idea, we now need to add in our main points. So because this speech is technically around a 5-minute speech at most, if we can get there, I always encourage you to have between 2 to 3 main points. You are totally allowed to have 2 points. Especially if you're like, I want to get in, I want to get out, and I know my organizational pattern, there's no need to continue to go on with 3. If you have, the only thing that I want you to note is that out of your 2 main points, you cannot use personal examples or stories. They have to be examples outside of yourself. Now, outside of yourself also does not mean like my grandpa or my cousin's brother's boyfriend. Okay, those are still personal experiences. What I want you to do is start to look at examples outside yourself. So what can we look to? Well, we can look at people. Like historical people, somebody of famous nature. We can look at athletes. We can look at songwriters. We can look at bands. We can look at characters in a book. We can look at characters in a TV or in a movie, right? We can also look at any type of events that have occurred. We can look at wars or tragedies or social movements. Or we can look at, don't forget, like maybe there's artists here, right? We can look at political dialogues. We can look at political individuals. Any type of resource that you would like to utilize outside of yourself can be an example. You probably scrolled through 500 different examples in that 2 seconds that went through your head. You knew you agreed with it, but it was like, wait a minute, how do I agree with this? Oh yeah, because I've seen it blank, blank, and blank. Those blank, blank, and blanks can be your main point. Does this make sense to everybody? So how do you start to go about researching main points? If you know what your topic is about, if it's about overcoming challenges or hardships, what could you do to start researching? I'll tell you right now, you open up a newspaper, and I bet you're going to find a story of somebody in the lifestyle section. A story of somebody who's what? Battling something or overcame something or whatever. You go on Google. People that have overcome challenges. Shut it down. Great. There you go. Right? You think back to your history classes or your women's studies classes or Chicano studies class, and you're like, oh man, remember that one person? Each of you, maybe if you did a person or a team or something for your informative speech, feel free to utilize this individual, right? I'm sure that they've overcome. So you're like, oh man, what if I can't find anybody? I'll tell you, this is everyone. Who's ever made news hasn't just been like, God, I think I'm going to get off the bus today and become a professional basketball player. Okay, I'll do that. No. Everybody's gone through some kind of trial and hardship in the world to become where they are. And so those are the types of detail that you want to look into. So once you come up with these individuals or the events or the concepts or whatever you want to talk about, that's when we can develop our thesis statement. Essentially, you're going to have those main points before you even get into the classroom. So all you're going to have to do to come up with your entire introduction in those 5 seconds or that entire thesis is literally think, do I agree or disagree, why, and then fill in those 2 people. Does that make sense? Or those 2 events, or those 2 experiences, or that band, or that character from a book, however you want to look at it. Any questions here? So why I say if you have 2, you can't have any personal examples. If you have 3, however, you can add in a personal example, okay? But if I only require you to have 2 main points, and let's say you already have 2 outside of yourself, and then you have that one amazing story of your own, or of your cousin, sister's, boyfriend's, husband, girlfriend, whatever, where could you use that story? What? Scream it! What's part of the introduction? That's your attention getter. Because that is going to be the first thing to come to your mind anyway. When you look at that, Gustavo, the first reason that you probably even had that idea was why? Life's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Have each of you ever had this experience?
Yeah.
Where you were like, crap, wow, I really thought that was going to go one way. No?
Yeah.
Any of you?
Yeah.
Great. Then you can use something like that to start you off. I was going to do one for you. Anybody have a quote that they love?
But it's not about overcoming anything.
That's okay, huh?
It's change. Life's only constant.
What?
It'll just change. It's life's only constant.
Change. It's life's only constant. Fantastic. Oh my God. I've always been somebody who's taken great value in being incredibly organized, incredibly scheduled, and knowing exactly what my plans are to the T. I've done this not only on a daily calendar, but since I was younger, I've been planning for my future. A couple of years ago, I was thrown a huge curveball. And that curveball came in the package of learning that I was going to be having a baby. This type of change for me threw my entire scheduled, detailed, and organized calendar life into a spiral because I started to flip out that it wasn't part of the plan. However, over the time of getting accustomed in those 9 months, I started to learn that not always having everything perfectly scheduled and planned in my mind is going to be possible. And additionally, it doesn't always have to be a bad thing. Today, I was presented with the quotation, change. It's life's only constant. And that was done by Camille Soto. And I certainly agree with this quote because through change, it's understanding that it is always going to be there. It is a huge opportunity for growth as an individual. And I'd like to tell you how I agree that change is an opportunity for growth as an individual by first describing the television show, The Biggest Loser, and then by second, describing the character of Elle Woods from the original motion picture, Legally Blonde. So first, let me tell you a little bit about the television show, The Biggest Loser, and how that can help you all to see how I agree with the quotation that change, life's only constant, is true, because if we embrace that change, we can go on to be these better individuals, right? Does this make sense, y'all? How I did that? Okay. Things, I tell you. Oh no, my battery's going to die. With that introduction, you have now seen how we can go into our main points. So what am I going to be doing and developing in my main points? Well, I'm going to be finding examples and detail and description, just like I always do, that are going to help for all of you to see this agreement clearly. That is going to require for you to be incredibly specific. Now, the first step in each of your main points, after you give your transition statement, is, and you all know that your transitions have 3 parts to it, correct?
Yes.
What are those 3 parts? The signpost first, then the main point, and then the central idea. So go back to reminding us that not only are you agreeing, but like, what's that why? Does that make sense, everybody? Okay, great. Within each of your main points, I encourage each of us to first give a description of the main point. Why do I say describe the point? Well, not all of us know. How many of you have ever seen the TV show The Biggest Loser? By a show of hands. That's 2 people. So if I start to talk about the content and the experiences and what's gone on, are any of you going to be able to reference or have an understanding of the agreement in total?
No.
Probably not. We're going to need a little bit of a detail beforehand. So what I could do is I could describe this point. So if I went in and I said, by first talking about the television show, The Biggest Loser. For those of you who don't know, The Biggest Loser is a television show on NBC where individuals who are morbidly obese and have lost control of their life through eating come to a space called the ranch. I'm not sure. Anyway, if you don't know what certain things are called, that's okay. You can adapt to it. You have come to a ranch to be trained by professional athletic trainers. Through the process of training, each of them not only begin to learn how to manage their weight and lifestyle in a positive way, but additionally gain so much more in who they become and how they are able to overcome life's challenges. A specific example I would like to refer to from The Biggest Loser was a story of a woman named Caroline. Okay, so now what have I done? So I described to you the point itself, but now I've given you what? A specific example. So then I'm going to go in and I'm going to start to talk about Caroline's story. Caroline came to the ranch thinking that her issue was with food and eating. She had put on about 150 pounds on top of her already 150-pound frame, making her 300 pounds, in the process of about 2 years. What we came to find out is that Caroline's experience, she had lost both of her children and her husband in a car accident where somebody was speeding, hit them, and killed them all instantaneously. When she lost these people in her life, Caroline found a replacement through eating. Now, Caroline would work would work with great effort to accomplish her physical goals by running, by training, by eating the plan that they had. But the change that she made was, in fact, not to her physical appearance, but instead her mental outlook. When she was able to deal with and come face to face the death in her family, she was then able to start to see the reasons as to why she was eating and why she was coping through the process of hiding her body. This individual of Caroline came in thinking her life was going to be one way and her experience on The Biggest Loser was going to be one way, but it in fact became so much more. And by her understanding that change being this only thing that is constant in her life and being able to embrace this change that was happening and embrace the shift in letting go of the things and the horrific experiences that she had had, she was able to not only grow as a person by becoming a healthy weight, but additionally by becoming an ambassador for The Biggest Loser and going out and do many speaking engagements regarding people and acknowledging the reasons as to why behind they eat. So through this example of Caroline and the concept of The Biggest Loser, I hope that you can see that individuals oftentimes go into an idea with a change or are resistant to an idea of change, but once they embrace it, in fact, so much good can come by it. And that's why I agree with the quote, change, life's only constant. Now that I told you about The Biggest Loser, I'd next like to tell you about Elle Woods. Does this make sense to you? So what I've done is I've given you the example, and then I've related how I see that example as what? Evidence for my agreement or disagreement. Does that make sense to y'all? So tie it back in. Same idea that you've been doing the whole time. You're not going to tell me about what your parents do for us to get to know you better unless you show me, right, how what your parents do directly relates to. Just by saying there's a woman, Caroline, and she lost a lot of weight on The Biggest Loser, and that's why change is the only constant. I'm like, I don't understand any of that. You would have to walk me through how you drew to that conclusion. Does that make sense to y'all? So you're going to do that with each of your main points. Now it says here on the paper, example, example. If you have two examples, fantastic. But the key here, remember, is to be specific. I don't want to know about gangs in general. I want to know about a specific gang and a specific experience of where A, B, and C happened. Does that make sense? I don't want to know about the TV show Lost in whole. I want to know about a specific character and a specific storyline about a specific thing that happened that can relate to this. Does that make sense to y'all? So all of us have a favorite TV show, I'm sure, or a favorite movie. And in those movies that you've ever seen or a TV show that you've ever seen, has somebody overcome a challenge? Yes! Any of you ever read a book where somebody's overcome a challenge? Okay, good. So remember, these are the things that you can always pull on when you need to. So once you finish with your main points, we then go forward and we go into our conclusion. And what's the conclusion, everybody? Well, we start out with a good signpost. Good. Oh, thanks for participating. What's a signpost? Something like to conclude, in closing today, to summarize what we talked about. Then you also go into a repeat. So then we want you to repeat I want you to repeat the quote and the author so that we can round it back in. I want you to repeat your thesis again. And then finally, I want you to refer back to your attention getter. So something like, so today I told you a little bit about, and it doesn't matter how you go into each of these, I told you a little bit about the television show The Biggest Loser and the character of Elle Woods in the original motion picture Legally Blonde, so that you can understand my agreement with the quote change. It's life's only constant. And how it's true that life is something that, if you embrace that change, it'll encourage you to be a better person. So now looking back on my experience, I know that I can no longer sit and plan everything scheduled to be perfect and expect it to go that way. I have a 2-year-old who has a mind and a life of her own. And when I release the control of having to have scheduled and organized way of knowing that my life is going to go, it encourages me to become not only a better person, but also a better mother, a better wife, and a better teacher in all that I do. Does that make sense to y'all? It's going to die anyway.